Hi everybody, Colin Stevenson here, joined by my sensei, my hero, John Lenhart. Hi John.
Hi.
Now, I just want to let everyone know, before we go further with today's subject, I would like everyone to know why John's my hero, right? Just quickly, right? Because I say it at the beginning of every single video, and it probably makes you look like some sort of cult leader, John. Now, John couldn't be any further from a cult leader, right? John just happens to understand more than what people choose to learn. Okay, this is what I'm going to say. And John gave me words to my knowing. And anyone that was able to get into my brain, allow me to understand what I think, and put words to that, deserves to be my hero. So this is why I explain it. So today, we're going to talk about psychology part 3. Okay, just while we're on the subject, this is why I wanted to introduce and let people know why I say it. Now, psychology part 3 is uniqueness. Okay, my uniqueness, I couldn't determine. I knew a lot of things, but this was to do with me just living the experience. I couldn't put words to it. My uniqueness came from understanding through John's method, and this changed my psychology. This allowed me to grow and gain energy on a daily basis. And John, would you like to tell us some more about uniqueness, please?
Yeah, so the whole issue here is, what is the cause of the person? When you look at a person, what do you believe is their cause? And like I told in part 1, when I talked to the psychology professor, he believed that our behavior was an effect of some external happening and we respond. That's how an animal operates. That's actually animal behavior. So this psychology teacher was telling me that our behavior is the same as an animal. Other people would say it's our brain, and our brain is the physical organ in our head, and that is really the physical cause, and that makes us into a robot. Basically, if I logically explain something to you, you'll logically do the right thing. We just finished, earlier this week, an episode about science, and I talked about 4 principles can solve any problem, and these 4 principles would identify the logical way to talk to everybody if they were a robot.
Yep.
We've also done a show on dissolve, where we learned that when you solve a person's problem, you make 3 more problems for them, because solve always focuses on a tangible cause. The big issue here is we as humans have an intangible cause, and that is our mind. There are some cultures that use the word mind to mean brain, and that gets very confusing. People say our conscious mind or our unconscious mind. They really mean our unconscious brain or our conscious brain. When I talk about mind, some people might call it your soul.
Yep.
Some people might call it your spirit. Whatever you call it, what is the intangible cause? Each one of us is an intangible cause. The intangible is always the first cause. When you look at a building, the first cause of that building was an idea. Let me touch the idea. Where's the idea? We make representations of the idea, but the intangible is always the first cause. And for an individual, you are a mind, which is intangible.
Yes, absolutely. Now, for me, we've been speaking now for about 14, 15 months very regularly. And the difference between myself 14, 15 months ago to now, working with my intangible driver, working with my soul, my spirit, excuse me, whatever way you want to look at it or call it, the difference and the flow that I have in my life is totally different. It doesn't mean that I'm the best person in the world. It doesn't mean I still don't have human traits. It still doesn't mean that I cannot, faltered by the wayside. I'm not a preacher of some sort and not living by I'm living by the intangible, which is the way that I should be living. It doesn't mean it should be the same as anybody else. And when I use your intangible driver diagnostic, shall we say, with relationships, with single people, even within my clients all over the place, all over the world. And once they learn that, they watch the videos that we have, that is enough to touch their soul or their spirit or whatever, rather than even go into the brain. Now, I would like to just, for the people and the psychologists especially, to understand who's watching this video, if you touch somebody's soul, this is the first cause. This is the first thing that before we think about it, before we feel it, before we touch it, if you touch on that and that feels understood, it's going to relax and it's going to allow that to open up and it's going to allow more to come in. And this is why what you do and what I am now doing is so, it's priceless. It's priceless.
Right. Once you say to a person their uniqueness, their unconscious, which is part of their brain, knows that about them, but they feel connected, they feel settled. And I used to do, years ago, I used to say, who are you, to people? And they might say, you know, I'm a millionaire. It's like, no, that's what you have. Who are you? And they might say, I'm a doctor, I'm a father, I'm a lawyer. No, that's what you do. Who are you? The issue is that everybody is trying to figure out who they are. And I love to ask people, who are you? Even these people online who say they can help people with who you are. I'll say, who are you? And you'll get these answers that are a do or a have. And that's the issue, is who you are as a cause. The effect is what you do. What you do as a cause, the effect is what you have. Advertising and our world flips this. If you had this, then you'd be able to do this, and then you'd be someone. Yeah. And that is the definition of mental illness right there, is reversing causality, which we talked about. So I want to help people figure out who they are. And what I've found is every person that I've worked with who's attempted suicide believed that who they are is what they do or what they have. And when they found out they weren't ever going to be able to do this thing or have this thing, what's the point of living? If you can't be who you're made to be, there's no reason for living. The minute they found out that they are not the have or do, they are the are, now they could see different ways to express who they are. And now they never, ever wanted to commit suicide again. So to me, understanding who you are would dissolve suicide.
Absolutely. And we are all about dissolve and not solve, as we've spoken about. And going back to previous experience myself, and I'm exhorting a bit here, when I used to go through it and I used to get myself involved in different ways of life, because I thought that's what I had to have or had to do to get to where I was. As we've spoken about, I've done a lot through experience of myself without gaining help, if that kind of makes sense. So I've helped myself through mostly the hard way, but and in terms of done it, but the information's logically stayed in my head, or is intangibly stayed there. Now that I'm able to understand my uniqueness, I'm able to use all of that experience to then go on with my life in flow, understanding who I am. And it reminds me of a film with Jack Nicholson and Adam Sandler called Anger Management. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Parts of it, yeah.
He invites Dave in. He says, who are you, Dave? And Dave's like, I'm a this and I'm a blah, blah, blah. And they're talking away. And he says, no, that's what you do. Just exactly the way you explained. So his foot starts trembling and he starts getting really frustrated and he starts getting really angry. And then he starts flipping out. He's like, what do you want from me? What do you want? I can't. This is what happens with people in life when they're trying to have a do or a have on a larger scale. And this is where suicide comes from, because they're trying to work on who they are or what they're doing. It's not the fact that they're in debt. It's not the fact that they can't get out of debt. It's the fact that they don't understand how they can gain energy for who they are to be able to see a path for themselves. It's nothing to do with the debt. It's nothing to do with the relationship breakdown. It's nothing to do with the job loss or the bullying or anything. It's because this person can't see themselves to be able to come back out.
Right, so how does psychology figure out who you are? Personality test. And what I like to say is, more than 2,000 years ago, all these personality tests, every 16 grid, test like a Myers-Briggs, or every personality test that you're out there with 4, colors or 4 animals or 4 all of this stuff, all of those are based on a theory called the 4 temperaments. And Hippocrates created this theory. And what he said, so this is the creator of every personality test that's ever been created. Here's what he said. Whenever I see one of these 4 behaviors come out of a person, I know they are unbalanced. They have too much or too little bile, black bile, blood, or phlegm. So what he's saying is these 4 personalities or these 4 behaviors prove you're unbalanced. That isn't who you are. That's how you respond with your behavior to not getting to be who you are by its very definition. So right there, we've taken people off course. And again, the word personality comes from the Latin word persona, which means mask. So a personality test shows the mask you hide behind in order to deal with your issues. So that took us off course right there. Now, 2 years ago, Northwestern University came up with a new way, a better way to look at people's personalities. And we're going to talk about this in part 4, because I'm going to show you that they actually model it to the 4 thought processes. So you think about it, we have behavior, that's the personality test, that's the animal. These people have a model that's your thought process, that's the robot of the brain. I'm giving you this intangible explanation, which is really who you are. And that is why we're able to dissolve issues with people. If you don't get to an intangible cause, you're going to create more problems. You're going to solve people's problems and create more problems. You have to get to an intangible cause, who they are, in order to dissolve the problems. And that is why I believe a lot of the counseling and the psychology out there, while it may help someone in the short term, it deals with a symptom. It doesn't cure the person. And we're talking about actually being able to cure the person, actually being able to have mental health.
Yep, absolutely. And just while we're talking about the personality profiling, because that's what I started off doing. And rather than you say to me, Colin, what you're doing is actually hurting people by using this. And then when I explained to you that I wasn't doing it because somebody's highly influential, these things, because I was using a certain, I'm not going to give them any advertising here, but I was using a certain profiling system. And while I was using that, I wasn't seeing what they were showing me, the training that they gave me in how to read and how to analyze people. I was actually going against. So I was thinking contrastively with every person that I had in front of me, I was going against, okay, well, prove me wrong, prove me wrong, prove me wrong. And it was coming up with different things. So when I was able to say to somebody, okay, well, I'm picking up this, 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 and this, they were like, how do you even know that coming from a personality test? Because that's nothing to do with my personality. No, but that's showing where you're off balance. And this is the things that we need to try and speak with. So that was what I was doing initially. But now that I've obviously met yourself and I'm able to now show people what they do intangibly, I don't need to show people a personality test anymore. I don't need people to understand if they're influential or dominant or an ENFJ or an INFP. It doesn't matter. It's all just things. It's all just labels and numbers and letters. And what I do is I'm able to physically give them who they are. Imagine that, for free. For free. This is who you are. Yes. How did you know? It just is.
Right. So the thing is, and I was being contrastive back then, and I will be. We talked about in the last episode being contrastive. And I'm a scientist, so I'm a real scientist who's going to be contrastive. I say, so one of the ways to be contrastive is, how could a personality test be a good thing, John? I will tell you. A personality test shows people how they react when they're under stress, and it helps other people know what not to do in order to trigger them. So if you have a control personality, that means when you get stressed and unbalanced, you look to solve your problem by controlling. That's good for everybody to know, because if they deny you control, you're going to trigger and go to 320. And we're going to talk about this in part 4 next week. But that's where it could be used. And that's what I told you then. I said, Colin, you can use that to show people how they look when they're upset, and to warn other people what not to do to put them over the edge. And that's a good temporary fix. That's actually resolve. That's not solve, that's resolve. And then you can help them dissolve. And that's what you were doing, is you would go in, you'd use the personality test to resolve, and then you were taking them past that. So there is a way that that can work. But how ought this really to look? Well, what is uniqueness? I like to talk about 3 measures of uniqueness, and they're all basically intangible. So the first measure, we've talked a lot about it, it's your intangible driver. You're the driver of the car. So I have this analogy that you are a driver in a car. Your car is your brain. You, the driver, is your mind or soul or spirit, however you want to say it. 10% of your car, you're in direct control over. Gas, pedal, steering wheel, brake, that's 10% of your brain, conscious brain. 90% of your car is your unconscious brain. So if we keep that model in mind, you are a driver in a car. Your intangible driver is the driver, the intangible driver of your car. They have a how and a why, and they go about it. They do things a certain way. That's the how. That's what we all see. In order to get an effect on other people, that's the why. That determines that driver. And the important thing is to help you know what kind of driver you are. If you're a truck driver, you don't want to drive like you're driving a sports car. And that's where a lot of issues happen, is I meet a lot of sports car drivers who are being told to drive like a truck driver. Yeah. Let me help you become the sports car driver. But do you know who you are? That's the first issue we want to settle. And that's what I did with you.
Yeah. And that literally changed my life. And now that I'm able to diagnose or, look into other people and able to tell them from their behaviors, I'm able to then speak to them on a level where I can get work done, where maybe they could go to a psychologist. I'm not saying I'm better than a psychologist. I don't know what a psychologist knows, but I'm able to connect with these people quicker than most other people because I understand their intangible driver, which means that I would effectively, more than 90%, and I'll put a number on it, more than 90% of people that are taking groups or classes or therapy sessions or anything, I will connect with people 90% faster and allow them to relax quickly to gain more information to allow things to move on.
So you jumped ahead of me, and you're exactly right. I'm going to show how that works, but I'm going to cover 2 more uniquenesses. So that I completely agree with that. I want to show people that. Second uniqueness is how you process, or literally how you think. So how does the driver use the brain? How do you use the steering wheel and the gas pedal? How do you think? People tend to be an internal processor or an external processor. And everybody thinks the way they think is wrong. I love giving this speech in classes because the kids just all of a sudden relax. An internal processor has to think before they talk. I like to look at it as 3 levels. One level is when people say, I don't know if I'm internal or external. Okay, then whatever you are, you're going to be slightly. So you can be slightly internal. Internal is you're very quiet, Slightly internal is you have an answer right after someone's done talking. Internal is you're quiet. Super internal is shy. I've gone into a classroom. They've told me this elementary school kid is shy. He won't answer any questions, Mr. Lenhart. And I went, this kid is super internal. And the point I made to the rest of the class, I did this spectrum and I showed everybody where they're at. And I said, this kid's over here. I said, what that means is when you ask him a question, everybody needs to be quiet for 5 seconds. Because he has to think in order to talk. And if you start talking, he stops thinking. So I asked him a question. Everybody stopped talking for 5 seconds. And the kid looked around like he wasn't sure people were going to talk. And then he answered it. And everybody's in shock. It was the first time this kid ever answered a question in class. 3 weeks later, the person in charge of special ed walked in the classroom and watched the students all tell each other, be quiet. He needs to answer the question. So they knew that about the kid. The kid could own his uniqueness, and that is how he thinks. So people who are internal in the professional world think they're introverts, and they think they're slow. And there's a lot of articles on LinkedIn about, can you be an introvert and be good in business? Because all these external processors just have this answer like this, and I have to think, and I don't look smart. That's how you think. External processors, like Colin and I, we have to talk in order to think. That's why it doesn't do us any good to have a script. It doesn't do us any good to plan this out. We don't know what we're going to say. We don't even know what we think. We roughly know what the topic is, but we got to talk it out. So if you're slightly external, you have to talk in order to think, and you might kind of interrupt. If you're external, you're going to interrupt people. So external people think they're rude. I'm a rude person. The way I think is wrong because I interrupt people. If you're super external, you say everything you're thinking to the point that you'll say a question. People think you're asking a question, you're thinking. And I've had teachers tell me, that kid is so rude. He'll ask a question and he won't wait for an answer. And I'm like, no, he's thinking. He's thinking that question, but he has to do that. And what I tell these students is if you have to talk to think, you don't have to talk loud. You can whisper to think. You don't have to distract the classroom. But if a teacher tells a kid he can't talk in order to think and he's external, you're going to get wrong answers and a frustrated kid who's going to behave poorly. So it's important to understand that uniqueness. In the car and driver analogy, I like to look at it as how you change lanes. An internal processor, when they make the decision to change a lane, they come over. And they don't care if there's another car. If you're external, you kind of put your blinker on, then you look and you start this negotiation. Am I coming over? Are you coming over? Am I? And every time I teach this, I feel like we save a marriage. Because here's what would happen, is if I'm external, I'm going to say something like, I'm never going to talk to that person again. And if my spouse is internal, she'll hear that and she'll go, if I said that, that would be the end of the argument. I've made my decision. So she'll walk away. Later, when I talk to that person 2 or 3 weeks later, she's going to go, I thought you said you're never going to talk to that person again. I was just thinking. So internal processors appear to be very stubborn because once they make the decision, they've done all the thinking. Once they've said it, they're done. And you're not going to change their mind. External doesn't want to be held to their words because when they say a decision, that's the beginning of the process of figuring out what they want to do.
Yeah. I find that it's possible that I could be toggling. I'm definitely more external 100%, but I believe that I can toggle over to internal sometimes. And it can be depending on who I'm speaking to. But I believe that is not because of me. I believe that I'm external. I believe that I'm able to toggle over there because I'm understanding the way the other person wants to be spoken to. And that can be where the answer comes from.
Right. And the thing is we can move. It's not like we can't move it. This is all about energy.
Yeah.
Again, you get more energy just talking versus if you had to think everything out and say the exact right answer, you could do it.
No.
But you're going to lose all your energy. And that's where this is about humans. If you're a computer, you can do this. If you're a human, you can do it and lose a bunch of energy. And that's what this uniqueness is about, is we're either losing energy or gaining energy with everything we do. The third measure of uniqueness is how you enter your brain. You are a mind and you actually enter your brain. There's 2 halves of your brain. So a lot of people say, I'm either right brain or left brain. And it implies that you only use half of your brain. They've done studies. That's been proven to be a fallacy. No one is right brain or left brain, meaning they only use one part of their brain. What happens is you start your thought process, you tend to in one half of your brain, and you finish it in the other half of the brain. Your left side of your brain is the logical, but it's the small picture part of your brain. Your right brain, they say the artistic or creative, it's the big picture. So it's really not artistic or logical. It's basically big picture or small picture. I have everybody say, I think I'm both. Everybody can think small picture. Everybody can think big picture. It's all about the direction. So the minute I say a dog, everybody can imagine a dog, but which way do you want to go to get energy? Do you want to see what kind of breed it is and what the dog's name is? That's small picture. Do you want to see where the dog's at and what other animals around it? That's big picture. So everybody can think small or big, but the minute you plop yourself down someplace, you're going to naturally want to go a certain direction to get energy. And that's the important part, is which way do you want to go to get energy? What I tell people is, if you are small picture and I'm big picture, I'll describe a parade. I'll describe all the parts of the parade, not in detail and totally out of order. If you're a small pitcher, you'll go, do I have to remember all this? I'm never going to remember all this. And when is this guy going to shut up? What I say to small picture people is let the big picture person talk. And when they're done, talk about any part of the parade you want to talk about in as much detail as possible. Now, if I'm big picture and you're small picture and you start talking about, John, you mentioned tigers, and Bengal tigers have very interesting whiskers, and the whiskers, and now I'm sitting there going, if I'm big picture, I'm like, we are talking about the whiskers on a tiger that might not even been at the parade. Now I'm feeling confined. Now I'm feeling like I'm in a box and I'm like, this is not important. I don't even care. What I tell big picture people do is keep the whole picture in perspective and see how what they're saying connects to it. Because they're taking a part of your picture and making it high def. And when you see the connection, the whole picture goes into high def. And it's a rush for big picture people. And now you can make your picture bigger. So it's those three, and Colin, you and I are both big picture. So we're both big picture, external. Ed Mabrie is external as well, but he's small picture. So that's the thing is we had three external guys who just talk and interrupt each other. Everybody thinks we're rude.
Do you know, when Ed and I, we did we've done a couple of videos together, Ed and I, that are on this channel as well. And I would like people watching this video to go back and watch the difference between Ed and I talking and you and I talking, and they'll understand the difference mega. Because when I give you a subject and it's big, you can make it bigger, and then I can make it bigger, and then you can make it bigger, and it just becomes bang. When Ed and I talk, I give the picture, as you say, I hold my own, and then I allow him to come in. It's almost like illuminating parts of that picture. And whenever he does it, the energy that you're talking, I'm like, wow, I've never thought of it like that before. It's so cool. And we literally, and it just shows how once you understand, like, I get that because I've been doing this now for a length of time that I'm able to do it naturally. But it just shows, like, before, when I would never struggle with communicating. I was always external, but when I was able to struggle of maybe sometimes understanding other people, like, I would never have looked at it that there would have been conflict. And then they go into detail and I'm like, oh, exactly the way you spoke about and how I get bored. And now it's like I can always say that. And Ed blew my mind at certain points. And I would love people to go back and watch the Ed Mabrie videos as well, just to watch the difference in the two.
Right. So I love to model. I'm doing all this modeling, and the people that I model with are all small picture, and Ed's one of them. I love talking with Ed because, and you described it perfectly, he illuminates. I'll paint this picture and then he'll come in and he'll see some fact and some connection in there and something I never even saw. And all of a sudden I see all these other implications, and then I'm like, when is he going to stop talking? Because I want to tell you, what I've done. And so it's all this energy, and it's a state of flow. You get with somebody. That's the whole point, is if you understand how that works. I'm big picture, he's small picture. It can feel very uncomfortable, but when you understand each other's uniqueness, all of a sudden you can flow together and everything takes off. So I want to bring this all together with the example you jumped ahead on, because these counselors in America, insurance only pays for so many sessions. And what tends to happen is a counselor or a psychologist will help somebody as long as they have insurance, and then the insurance lapses and they didn't finish the project. So I know there's a lot of psychologists and counselors who go, you know what, I would be a lot more effective if they would let me have more sessions. I actually help counselors help people within that amount of sessions. And when I teach them, they never want to share with people where they got it from, but they all get promoted and they all show they're doing these things. And I'll give you an example. So this guy who I know, he's an exhorter server, big picture. And I would ask him, how's it going with your wife? And he goes, oh, great. We're going to go up to Door County, which is north of here in Wisconsin, a vacation place. We're going to go up to Door County, next summer. That's awesome. How's it going at work? Oh, it's going okay. I mean, we have to deal with this telethon that's coming up next month. Okay. I go, how's it going with your son? He goes, oh, well, last year he starts explaining a story about his son. And when he's done, I ask him another question about his son. And he's like, why are you asking me about my son? why aren't you asking me about my wife or my job? And my point is, you don't have a problem with your wife or your job. You have a problem with your son. How could you know that? And it was true, and he was mad that I figured it out. I said, your exhorter server, those are both forward. Your big picture, that's general. I asked about, your wife. You talked about a future event in generalities. I talked about work. You talked about a future event in generalities. I asked about your son. You told me a backward story in detail. That's not who you are. You've got an issue with them. And that's what happens is I can show a counselor how to get to the person's uniqueness in 5 to 10 minutes. And now from the very first session, you're starting to figure out where the issue is, and then you're going to be able to fix it. So what I've shown you is what I call step 1. In the next part, we'll talk about step 2, which is the brain and figuring out where the damage is. But this is what would help somebody do this immediately. And I will tell you this. We're going to put a link on here that you can go to our lesson 1 for free. And lesson 1 for free covers this uniqueness. So if you're a counselor or if you're a psychologist and you want to get this information and not tell anybody where you got the information so you can quickly help people, I'm all for this. My goal of this was never to make money. My goal was to help the world. And when I met with a psychology teacher, he told me, stop doing this, stop helping the world. So that has always been my goal. I've always offered this on LinkedIn for free to help people. And less than a dozen people over a year, one of them being Colin, even reached out to me. So that is all I've ever been about. So when you look at the link, there's a lesson 1. It'll show you how to figure out these uniquenesses immediately, and you can be able to help your patients more quickly.
Yes, absolutely. So again, we'll just reiterate, we do not believe that psychologists are bad. We don't believe counselors are bad. We just believe they can have value added to what they do to make their job easier, quicker, and better for the main, the client. And this is what we want to do. You want to change the world. I want to change the world. And regardless of you being administrator, teacher, or me being compassion server, our end goal is the same, and we talk to each other the way that we want to be spoken to. And that means we can be the best of friends for the rest of life without ever falling out. And I can't say, even we'll just talk about it quickly, about a psychologist, and they won't have the perfect marriages, they won't have the perfect relationships, because they will try and psychoanalyze the effects of the person and how to change that rather than look at their uniqueness. So I will also add to a psychologist, if a counselor, if you're watching, if you believe that your relationship's going because of the behavior of, and you've got to solve the behavior of your partner, please take the intangible drivers test on this link, because I promise you, once you speak to them the way that they want to be spoken to, you're not going to need to analyze anymore, which means you can flow better, which means that you're standoffish and you're not on the ready, which will take you from 160 back to 80, and we'll discuss that at a later time. So listen, thank you, John. Thank you so much today. Again, I'm sure people will find this very, very interesting. I'm looking forward to this being put out. And
Thank you.
people start in. So you take care, and I will speak to you very soon. All the best.